Hi, my name is Emma Burlett. So for my lesson that I chose to, convert to a blended learning model, my students in my class right now, I teach seniors in high school. They had to write an argumentative paper on a topic of their choice, so it had to be a controversial issue. And this week, their rough drafts are due. So as I was kind of contemplating, what the revision and editing process would look like, instead of me just giving them very specific feedback and then moving on with our curriculum, I would definitely want to try to do some station rotation work for a couple of days in my class with the revision and editing process. So just like Catlin Tucker did with her writing students, except this time it would be specifically for the revision and editing. So many of my students have been very out of practice with their writing because of the pandemic. And many of them really do not know or remember a lot of grammar and usage rules. And they, really do struggle to make stylistic choices. So the very first thing that I would do, the very first station would be my students who failed to produce a draft. So I would pretty much like patrol this area very heavily, make sure they're on task, but this would be an online station. They can listen to music. I like to call that my coffee shop workday. They can listen to music while they write their draft as long as they are on task and writing this draft to produce, their material to revise and edit. And then my students who do have materials to start revising and editing, I would start them at a station. And this would be not on a fixed schedule, so not like 5 minutes per station. It would absolutely be on a, by my discretion, whether or not they complete their tasks, that kind of thing. So the students who are ready to move on and the second station would be in the editing phase. So they would do some mini lessons on commas, punctuation, capitalization, things like that, very basic grammar stuff that they can go through and kind of get done fairly quickly. And then the third station, again, online, just like station two, would be mini lessons on stylistic choices, revisions. So it would be maybe mini lessons on sentence structure, um, how to vary their sentence structure throughout their paper, how to, be more clear with their word choice, and how to organize their paper a little bit better. And that would break that down. Especially for my students who really need that differentiated learning, who need it to be scaffolded down. And just as a refresher, these first three would be, patrolled by me, making sure they didn't have any questions. And then I can always kind of modify that learning for students with 504s, SPED, things like that. Give graphic organizers, etc. And then the last two stations would be offline. So these would be peer editing and the one-on-one conferences with me, and that would be last. The peer editing would absolutely be on a rubric system. The peers would receive the rubric, they would read each other's drafts, and then they would discuss and ask questions about each other's drafts. And this would be like where the biggest part of that collaboration would come from. I would want them to maybe work in small groups to work through mini lessons, but this is where that collaboration and their choices would really come into play here. And then in that last conference, they would need to come prepared with questions and a list of 3 to 5 things to address in their paper with me. But this, I want it to be the last stop. And I chose this because a lot of my students either are going to go to college next year or they're not. And either way, they're going to have to start making choices about their writing and about really truly anything. And I don't want them to feel pressured to perform what I want them to perform to. I want them to make their own choices and have agency over what they choose to revise and edit out of their paper. Now, I can always make suggestions, but I don't want me to be the sole audience here. I want them to keep in mind that they do have choices over their paper and there is no one right way to do it. And I want to put that learning in their hands and make this as student centered as possible, because especially with academic writing, we want to write to impress the teacher. But unfortunately, that's just not the way that works after high school. We need to write to specific audiences and we need to be able to make those stylistic choices. And if this were a vertical lesson, this would probably take several weeks if we were to really do it right and really get in depth with the learning here. And we just don't have several weeks. I mean, we would have to go through grammar lessons. We would have to go through revision lessons. We would have to go through several days of conferences. We would have to do the peer editing round robin, and that just we don't have time. We would probably have about 2 weeks, no, 1 week before between rough drafts are due and spring break. So we would really need to make sure that this is a horizontal lesson so the students can get the actual learning done in a limited amount of time. So that's why I chose this assignment. Just a couple of things to think about. But yeah, I'm open to any suggestions as well, because I'm actually am planning on probably using this in my class. So any suggestions would be absolutely welcome.